You know those moments when a tiny, innocent frustration suddenly just, like, explodes?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's someone cutting you off in traffic, or a small comment from a colleague that just sends your whole mood spiraling down.
Hmm.
We've all felt that sense of being completely hijacked by our own emotions, haven't we?
Absolutely. It's a totally universal human thing. We're navigating this constant stream of feelings, big and small, every single day.
Right.
And for a lot of people, that desire to somehow turn down the volume on the really intense ones, especially the negative ones, well, it gets pretty strong.
Exactly. And that's precisely what we're diving into today, emotion regulation.
Yeah.
Think of it as like developing your own internal GPS system, learning to read your emotional compass, recalibrate when you're off course, and steer through the storm.
That's a great analogy.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack what emotion regulation truly means, why it's so fundamental, for daily life, relationships.
Yeah.
Look at the strategies people use, the good and the, well, not so good ones.
Right. The helpful and unhelpful.
And most importantly, show you how you can maybe gain more intentional control over your own emotional states. We've pulled together insights from a whole bunch of psychology resources to give you a comprehensive, but hopefully pretty digestible understanding.
Sounds good. And at its heart, emotion regulation is basically your ability to guide your own emotional state.
Guide, okay.
It's definitely not about being a robot, like totally devoid of feelings. It's more about influencing which emotions you experience, when you experience them, and crucially, how intensely you express them.
I was really struck by how the research kept emphasizing that it's not about rigid control or, just suppressing everything.
No, suppression is different.
Right. It's more about moderating the intensity or maybe how long an emotion lasts. So we're talking about like rethinking a tough situation to maybe dial down anger or anxiety.
Exactly. Or proactively focusing on things that make you feel happy or calm. That's a really vital distinction. It's a spectrum of influence, really. We often talk about downregulation that's reducing the intensity.
Right.
So imagine someone grieving who finds a moment of calm by remembering something funny about their loved one.
Yeah.
Or an anxious person deliberately shifting their thoughts away from a worry.
Makes sense.
But it also includes upregulation. That's where you actually amp up an emotion.
Really? Amping up? That sounds counterintuitive.
It can be, but think about it. Sometimes it's useful. Like when a big challenge needs a healthy dose of maybe anxiety or excitement to get you motivated, to get you moving.
Ah, okay. I see that now. And this next bit, drawing from psychologist James Gross's model, that really changed how I thought about it.
The process model.
Yeah. It highlights that we have these different intervention points kind of along our emotional timeline.
Mm-hmm.
You can manage things before an emotion even fully forms that's antecedent focused, like spotting the storm cloud, you said.
Right, before it rains.
Or if the emotion's already hit, you can work on how you respond to it, response focused, like navigating the rain once it's started. It's knowing when and where to step in.
Which brings us right to, well, why is this ability so crucial?
Yeah, why does it matter so much?
Our emotions are just so deeply intertwined with our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior. And, as adults, there's this general expectation societally that
Sure.
we manage things like anger or anxiety in, let's say, socially appropriate ways.
And the ripple effect, when we can't do that,
Mm-hmm.
it can be huge.
Absolutely profound.
Think about relationships. Uncontrolled anger.
Oh.
You can say incredibly hurtful things.
Oh, definitely.
It erodes trust, pushes people away, and trying to repair that, it takes so much time and energy, and sometimes, it just doesn't work.
Exactly. And it hits your personal well-being directly, too. Persistent sadness, that can really lower your quality of life.
For sure.
Unchecked fear can stop you from taking risks, from embracing new things. It leads to just unnecessary suffering.
So what happens if we just keep trying to shut down or avoid emotions? What's the long-term cost there?
Well, the sources are pretty clear on this. If you consistently shut down or avoid feelings, it often leads to this pervasive sense of, powerlessness.
Powerlessness. Okay.
And cycles of negative thinking, that rumination you mentioned just going over and over, something unhelpfully.
Like that loop?
Resentment builds up. You can even see physical complaints emerging.
Wow.
And it's worth noting, too, difficulty with emotion regulation is often a key piece in various mental health challenges. It can signal conditions like borderline personality disorder or depression.
So it really connects to everything, making thoughtful choices instead of just reacting.
Mm. Managing relationships, solving problems effectively.
Better overall mental health.
Right. It's all linked.
This brings us to understanding emotion dysregulation.
Yes. Which is essentially when you struggle to consistently use healthy strategies
Yeah.
to sort of diffuse or moderate those really intense negative emotions.
So it's not just having a bad day.
No, everyone has off days. Everyone sometimes uses less than ideal coping methods. It becomes a concern when overwhelming, intense negative emotions are a regular thing, and they drive you to rely on unhealthy coping mechanisms pretty consistently.
It sounds like it could be easy to fall into what some call an emotional cascade.
It really is.
Like that example you gave.
Okay.
A friend walks past you, doesn't say hi,
A common one.
and boom, immediately you might feel this rapid-fire confusion, disappointment, self-doubt, maybe anger.
All at once.
Those feelings quickly turn into thoughts like, what did I do? Or
Yeah.
they must be mad at me.
Exactly. And that initial cascade creates this intense discomfort inside and a really strong desire to just make it stop.
Right, just stop the feeling.
And that desire often translates into an unhelpful action. Maybe you go home and just dwell on it, ruminate,
Yep.
or you withdraw from the friend completely. Or maybe reach for, a tasty treat as a quick fix.
Ah, the comfort food trap.
Right. And that's how the pattern can become this vicious cycle. Unless something changes, that continued avoidance of the bad feeling can actually end up reinforcing the initial negative thoughts. Makes the whole cycle harder to break next time.
There was a really stark example in the sources about self-injury.
Yeah, that's a powerful, though difficult, example.
It's described as this devastating short-term fix to stop overwhelming feelings.
Right. It provides immediate, though temporary, relief.
But ultimately, it just deepens the inner distress and really weakens long-term well-being. It's like a short-term gain for a massive long-term cost.
A very high cost. So what makes this whole process, regulating emotions so challenging for some people?
Yeah, why is it harder for some than others?
Well, it can be a few things. Factors like deeply ingrained beliefs about negative emotions, maybe thinking they're bad or completely uncontrollable.
Like you just have to suffer through them.
Kinda, yeah. Or it could just be a lack of developed skills. Nobody ever taught them how. Or sometimes you're just in situations that trigger such powerful emotions that you get hit with emotional flooding.
Flooding.
Yeah, where you feel completely overwhelmed, like you've lost control. Think extreme stress or uncertainty.
Yeah.
And for some, the challenge runs even deeper, something like alexithymia.
Alexithymia, what's that exactly?
It's basically a difficulty in cognitively processing your own emotions. So trouble paying attention to them, describing them.
So you don't even know what you're feeling clearly.
Precisely. Which, as you can imagine, makes regulating those feelings incredibly complex. If you can't identify it, how do you manage it?
Wow. Okay, so given all that, where do these patterns of dysregulation usually start? You mentioned childhood.
Often, yes. The roots frequently trace back to childhood. For instance, temperament plays a role right from the get-go.
Temperament, like personality?
Sort of. Some infants are just genetically wired for more intense or longer stress reactions.
Really, from birth?
Yeah, and that can naturally contribute to poor emotional regulation skills as they develop.
That's fascinating. And what about trauma?
Trauma is a huge factor, especially catastrophic, unprocessed trauma, particularly in childhood, that can lead to really inflexible ways of dealing with emotions.
Inflexible how?
Like getting stuck in certain coping patterns, maybe avoidance or outbursts, because that's what helped them survive the trauma, but it's not adaptive long term. This often leads to more severe dysregulation.
And early attachment experiences with parents or caregivers.
Incredibly formative, yes. If caregivers were inconsistent or emotionally unavailable, or maybe they invalidated the child's feelings.
Told them, don't cry or you're fine.
Exactly. Those children might internalize unhealthy habits, maybe suppressing emotions entirely, or becoming overly dramatic to get attention.
And those patterns stick.
Sadly, yes. They often persist right into adulthood, making emotion regulation feel like this constant uphill battle.
Okay, another factor mentioned was low emotional intelligence, EI.
Right. Lower EI impacts regulation in several ways. You might struggle to accurately recognize your own emotions.
Like the alexithymia thing?
Related, yeah. Or misunderstand what's causing them, what the triggers are. You might react impulsively without really thinking, find it hard to express feelings constructively, maybe have less empathy for others.
And that leads to
Often relying on less effective strategies like avoidance or maybe even aggression.
it's It's important to realize just how widely this shows up, isn't it? Emotion dysregulation.
It really is. It's a core feature in various conditions. You mentioned borderline personality disorder, intense mood swings, relationship difficulties.
Yeah.
Complex PTSD often involves struggling to self-calm, maybe chronic emotional numbing,
Numbing. Just feeling nothing.
or feeling disconnected, yeah.
Yeah.
Then there are childhood conditions like disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, extreme moods, intense temper outbursts.
Okay.
For individuals on the autism spectrum, poor emotional regulation is pretty common. It can lead to more intense negative emotions, trouble with problem solving, getting easily overstimulated.
And difficulty reading others' emotions too sometimes.
Yes, that too. And even with ADHD, emotional dysregulation is a significant piece.
ADHD. How so?
They might have really strong reactions to relatively small setbacks, feel emotions much more intensely, have a lower tolerance for frustration.
Wow. It really underscores why learning these skills is so important, kind of across the board.
Absolutely crucial. So if we connect this all back, how do we start developing healthy strategies?
Yes, the practical stuff.
The sources highlight two broad categories. One is reappraisal.
Reappraisal. Changing how you think.
Exactly. Changing how you think about something to change your emotional response. The other is suppression.
Just ignoring it, stuffing it down.
Pretty much. And the research is pretty strong here. Suppression is linked to negative long-term outcomes, dissatisfaction.
So we definitely want to lean into reappraisal.
That's the goal.
Okay, let's unpack some key skills then. First one, and it sounds so simple, but maybe it's not, create space.
Crucial first step.
Emotions often happen so fast, right? You don't consciously think, okay, time to be angry now. You just are.
Instantaneous sometimes.
So the number one skill is to pause. Just take a breath. That tiny moment you create between the trigger and your usual reaction. It can feel huge, but that's where the choice lies, isn't it?
That's exactly where the opportunity for change opens up. Building on that, the next step is noticing what you feel.
Noticing, like in your body.
Yeah. Becoming aware of physical reactions. Is your stomach tight? Heart racing? Tension in your neck or shoulders?
Okay.
These physical clues are invaluable. They tell you what's happening emotionally, and actually focusing on them can sometimes diffuse the intensity a bit just by shifting your attention.
Right, distracts you slightly. Then naming what you feel.
Yes. Once you notice those sensations, put a label on the emotion. Is it anger, sadness, disappointment, maybe fear hiding underneath?
Fear often hides, doesn't it?
Very often. And just naming it, using a feelings wheel can help here if you're stuck. That act of labeling can instantly give you a bit more control. It often makes the emotion lose some of its power.
Lets you release some of the pain associated with it.
Precisely. Which leads to a really crucial point. Accepting the emotion.
Accepting it, even the bad ones.
Especially the bad ones. Recognizing that your emotions, all of them, are normal, valid parts of being human.
Okay.
Practicing self-compassion. Giving yourself grace for feeling what you feel. Understanding that even strong negative emotions are natural. Try breathing into the feeling, not fighting it.
Breathing into it. That sounds hard.
It takes practice. And finally, practicing mindfulness.
Mindfulness, we hear that word a lot.
We do. And basically, it's about consciously living in the moment, non-judgmentally observing your internal experiences, thoughts, feelings, sensations, and your external environment.
How does that help with regulation?
It helps you stay calm, anchored in the present, and avoid getting swept away by those negative thought loops that just amplify everything.
Okay, those are the core skills. What about practical strategies we can use day to day?
Good question. First, try to identify and reduce trigger.
Spot the pattern.
Exactly. Instead of just reacting, look for what consistently happens before you feel those strong emotions.
Okay.
And dig a bit deeper. Why do those specific things push your buttons? Especially if they connect to older insecurities.
Right. Next, tune into your physical symptoms.
Yeah, pay attention to basics. Are you hungry, tired, really stressed about something else?
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
That's a great acronym for it. These fundamental things can massively amplify your emotions. Just addressing them, getting a snack, taking a break can sometimes shift your whole emotional state.
That leads to a big one. Consider the story you're telling yourself.
Oh, this is huge. Our brains hate uncertainty, right? So when we don't have all the information, we fill in the blanks.
That's usually with the worst case scenario.
Often, yeah.
Yep.
So challenge those assumptions, question the negative story. A really nice technique here is the just like me practice.
Just like,
Remind yourself that the other person involved is also just a human being, probably trying their best, making mistakes, dealing with their own stuff, just like you. It fosters empathy, which can really diffuse your own negativity.
I like that. Then engage in positive self-talk.
Yes. When emotions are high, that inner critic can get really loud and harsh.
I always mess up. I'm so stupid.
Right. Counter that. Actively replace statements like, I messed up again, with something empathetic, encouraging, I always try so hard, or, okay, this is tough, but it's a learning experience.
Be kind to yourself.
Exactly. It mitigates the negative feeling and builds resilience.
Crucially, make a choice about how to respond,
This is key. You always have a choice, even when it feels like you don't.
even in the heat of the moment.
Even then, maybe your automatic response is to lash out in anger. Can you try something different? Can you pause, take that breath, and choose to articulate your anger calmly?
And see what happens.
Observe how that feels, how others respond. It's a powerful way to start rewriting your own emotional script.
And don't forget to actively look for positive emotions.
Yes, we have this natural negativity bias. Our brains latch onto threats and problems.
Survival mechanism, I guess.
Exactly. But it means we often overlook the quieter, positive feelings: contentment, interest, gratitude, amusement.
The small good stuff.
Right. By actively noticing those, making a point of savoring them, you consciously boost your resilience and your overall sense of well-being. Train your emotional radar for the positive.
And finally, sometimes you need help, right? Seek out a therapist or coach.
Absolutely. Acknowledge that this stuff can be really hard, especially if these patterns go way back. An outside perspective can be invaluable.
What can they offer specifically?
They can teach specific self-regulation skills. Dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, is really well known for this.
DBT. What does that involve?
It helps you identify those negative thought and behavior patterns and build distress tolerance.
A stress tolerance.
Yeah, the ability to sit with uncomfortable emotions and physical sensations without having to immediately escape them or act impulsively, using techniques like self-soothing, healthy distraction, radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance. Accepting reality even if you don't like it.
That's the core of it, yeah.
The sources also had some simple daily tips. Things like prioritizing basic physical needs.
Fundamental. Rest, healthy eating, exercise, they impact your overall mood, your satisfaction, give you a fresh perspective. Don't underestimate the basics.
And engaging in activities that build a sense of achievement every day.
Yes, even small ones. It's a powerful way to decrease negative moods and increase positive ones. A little bit of mastery goes a long way.
And remembering that insight, changing your thoughts is often easier than changing your feelings directly.
That's a profound point. Learn to ask critical questions about your thoughts. What's really pushing my buttons here? Is this thought actually true? Is it helpful?
So, by strategically reframing those negative thought patterns,
You can essentially guide your emotional state. You turn that feeling of an uncontrollable spiral into something more manageable.
okay. Now, let's explore some interesting differences the research mentioned. Gender, for instance.
Right. Some research suggests women often report experiencing both positive and negative emotions more intensely than men.
More intensely.
Yeah, which might contribute to greater reported difficulties with some regulation skills.
And there was something surprising about rumination versus reflection.
Yes. Women tend to report more depressive symptoms and more difficulty with rumination, that unhelpful, repetitive thinking loop.
Okay.
However, while they might be more prone to rumination, they also seem more prone to reflection.
Reflection. How's that different?
Reflection is using repeated thoughts productively to gain insight, understand things better, make positive changes. So it's like two sides of the same coin, both involving deep thought, but one is helpful, one isn't.
Fascinating. And how much of this is socialization?
Oh, a huge amount, undoubtedly. Cultural norms, learned behaviors, they definitely shape these differences.
Like men being taught boys don't cry.
Exactly. Or women being encouraged, sometimes expected, to talk about feelings more openly. These messages sink in.
And adolescence.
Yeah.
That came up as a particularly tricky time.
Very precarious, yeah. The whole period is challenging for emotion regulation, but especially during those teenage years.
Why then specifically?
Well, research shows, for example, adolescent girls tend to experience more interpersonal stress, friendship drama, social pressures, while boys often report more school-related stress and just the general internal distress and heightened sensitivity of adolescence. If you don't have good coping skills yet, it can easily lead to unhealthy patterns taking root.
Makes sense. It's a vulnerable time.
Extremely. So to kind of recap our deep dive here,
Yeah, let's pull it together.
emotion regulation is this really vital, learnable skill. It profoundly impacts, well, pretty much everything: relationships, well-being, decision-making.
It's not about not feeling things.
Absolutely not. The goal isn't suppression or avoidance. It's about understanding your emotions, managing them effectively, letting them be a natural part of your experience without letting them completely take over.
Developing that sophisticated internal navigation system, as you said.
Exactly. For your own emotional world.
That's it. And as you, our listener, continue on your own journey toward maybe greater emotional mastery, here's something to think about.
Final thought.
Considering the deep roots of our emotional responses in temperament, maybe past trauma, those early attachment experiences, how might understanding these foundational influences change the way you approach self-compassion when your own emotions feel overwhelming?
Mm-hmm.
Think about how that knowledge might shape your own path forward toward greater emotional